Okay, so I've taken some time and I've looked at the robot examples folder, and this won't be the last time that I look in that folder. In fact, as I go back and forth when I'm modeling my project, I might get stumped or I might get kind of hung up or have some sort of a creative block along the way. And I might need to go back and look at, maybe how the arms and the legs attach, you know, if I look at some of the examples that I like and say, I like how this just looks like a sphere that's kind of stuck in the side of this object. And that's a pretty effective way to attach the object. Here it's a little bit more complicated. There's, lots of different, wires and joints and kind of hydraulic looking stuff that's attached. And, here it's just a series of cylinders. And so I can refer back to these, not any one in particular. Maybe I find influence directly from this one, but I don't like the boxy shape of it, but I like the simplicity of it. Maybe I'll go back and refer to many of these that are relatively simple in terms of their construction and say, oh yeah, okay, they're just using a series of boxes and spheres or cubes and spheres, and I'm gonna borrow inspiration from that and try to come up with a solution. So I'll jump back into the robot examples as needed, or maybe I'll find some other examples when I'm working here, just to kind of think my way through some problems. Now, just a little bit of foreshadowing here, and I uploaded this video. This is just a real simple test video that I created. This is a combination of the robot and the city project. So here's a robot that I put together in a previous demo, and we'll model something a little bit different. I will model something a little bit different. Your robot, I'll encourage not to look exactly like mine. The idea is that you're, experimenting here, finding things that influence you, and creating, a custom character design. This project is not about repeating exactly what I do, but coming up with your own design in the process. So here's my previous robot design, and combined with part of one tile of the city, and we'll get into that project here a little bit later. So, and then just for kicks, I'll open up and show you a walk cycle. This is something that we do in the, one of the things that we do in the motion class, the 3D motion. So if you're interested in continuing on, that's something that we'll do at a later date. So I'm going to clear off my desktop those examples and really kind of get to the task of coming up with a concept for my robot. Now, I don't need to be a concept artist, and I don't need to be an illustrator or an artist of any kind in order to start sketching a concept. So I'm going to jump into Miro, and again, this link is provided in the lesson folder. It's miro.deviantart.com. Or I could jump into Photoshop or Illustrator, or even just grab a piece of paper on my desk and a pen and start to sketch some concepts. Now, the basic strategy here is that I don't want to start by creating shapes in Cinema 4D. I want to come up with a concept before, just so I have a clear idea of what it is that I'm trying to make. And so one of the cool things about Miro is this is a cloud-based kind of sketching tool, so I could just get in here and sketch something really quickly. This is all web-based, okay, and the tools are down here. So we have some basic paintbrush tools, eraser, fill and sample, same thing that we would find in Photoshop. And I could just ignore those and start with the basic, just the brush tool, and do a real simple sketch of the basic shape of my robot. So maybe I want to do a kind of a cylinder for the head, and I'll do another cylinder down here that kind of emulates the jaw, and I'll just do this really roughly. I'm getting a little sloppy with the mouse here, but so I have some cylinders here, and maybe I'll attach this with some kind of a sphere, and over here I'll just kind of attach an arm. These are all going to be a series of cylinders, and very quickly I can come up with a concept for my robot that's based on some really basic geometry. Maybe I'll have an antenna up here, and this will be glowing or sending out some kind of signal at some point. But I could really quickly kind of come up with a concept that maybe this is a sphere, or maybe this is just another kind of cylinder type shape that has a little bit of deformation to it, so that it kind of bends. And by just coming up with a real quick sketch, I have a real basic concept of how I might start to create my robot. Now, some people spend a great deal of time on the concept art, and I think that's something that we definitely want to do here. Oops, didn't want to do that. So I'll actually wipe this out and do another series of really quick sketches. But in Miro, and again, if you're comfortable with Photoshop or pen on paper, I would just encourage you to just spend a little bit of time coming up with the basic strategy. If I have a simple sketch that looks just like this will go a long way into informing the decisions that I'm going to make in a 3D space. Okay, so I won't be hung up on, okay, well, I really like, based on the influence that I saw in the robots folder, I really like the idea of not stacking the head up here on top of the shoulder, because that would give me kind of a very different look and feel than if I kind of stick it on the front of my object. Now, again, that's just just kind of thinking through this concept. That's a real simple solution. Now, inside Miro, a couple of things. I don't want to turn this into Miro demo, but this is kind of a really interesting tool. It's all web-based, so you run the risk if you lose your internet connection, you could lose the work that you have. I'm going to go from basic to pro, and that gives us access to layers, and I can add a layer. I did that original sketch on the background layer, and which is kind of a destructive process. So what I'm going to do is, if I just shop around, there's some really kind of simple options in here. We can file to create new files, we can create new canvases, we can open existing files, we can save the file that we have, which basically exports a PNG. I'm going to clear the canvas and say OK. And so that got rid of everything that I've already done. I'm going to create a new layer, and so now when I create something on a layer, I can show and hide, and that's kind of a less destructive process, because everything doesn't necessarily have to sit on one layer. So if I do a sketch maybe of a couple of robots, I can have them on different layers and maybe move them around. So now this Miro tool is a really cool tool, but it's certainly not going to take the place of anything like Photoshop. Photoshop is definitely the place to be for this kind of work. But if you don't have Photoshop, this is kind of a really fun tool. It is low res as well, so if you are going to spend a lot of time to create content, just know that it might not be portfolio worthy, or at least it'll translate to more of a thumbnail type sketch. So I'm going to start off with just the Paintbrush tool, and I want to do just a couple of really quick tests. Maybe I want to create a robot that has a really big head and a kind of a small body. So I'm just really kind of taking a look at what the proportions might be, and I'll just do some cylinders that have a little bit of a bulge in it for the legs, and I'll do the same strategy, connect the arms, and I'm just doing, this is basically just a line drawing. Oops. So this is basically just a real quick line drawing, and again, I'm not really worried about this kind of being a wonderful illustration. This is more about just kind of getting the rough concept out here, and so I'll figure out the eyes a little bit later, but maybe they'll be kind of like some cylinders, and maybe the mouth will just be this negative space in here. Okay, and then of course we got to have some kind of antenna, maybe some TV or bug antennas. That would be one concept, and so I kind of like the idea of having this big, huge head and this really small body. That could be kind of a fun. Concept here, or maybe something there was this really boxy robot that almost looked like it was just a box with legs, and I kind of like that concept as well. And it'd be kind of interesting if we just took an old school TV and maybe built a robot out of it. So, just kind of getting the idea of what some basic shapes and how we would solve. Maybe I want this more of a cube than a cylinder style arm. Just doing some really kind of, my mouse is, I'm getting a little crazy here with my mouse, folks, so I'm trying to do this really quickly. But coming up with some really quick and interesting concepts on just trying to figure out what the proportion of the head to the body is going to be. And so maybe I'll do something now that's a little bit kind of like this, where the body's a little bit more substantial. And again, whether I'm using spheres or cylinders, I can just kind of rough out that concept here just really quickly in a 2D space, and really get a really quick sense of what my robot, at least the proportion and some of the shapes that I want to use are. So again, not that we're going to spend a whole lot of time doing concept art, because that's not what this class is about, but we could very quickly come up with an idea and then translate that to 3D. So this might be my robot design here. I kind of like how this is emerging, although I think what I really want to experiment with more, if this is the body, is something that kind of bends a little bit more. And then if the head is either kind of attached by some kind of dome up top here that could kind of spin around and act kind of as a neck socket, and then we'll just do a little lower jaw here. It's attached with a rivet. Okay, so this, we could lose ourselves in this project and have loads of fun. This Miro tool is really kind of cool because it kind of comes with this real sketchy sort of drawing. If I sketch around, you can see it's kind of building this web. There's another really cool tool in here somewhere. I think it's called, what's that called? Sketch. And so this sketch actually gives you like a really nice sketchy line. So I was just using this this first brush tool, which I think is called, it's Web Link. So the sketch tool is really nice because it'll kind of build up your line work really quickly. It'll be gradual, but pretty quick at the same time. So so you can do some really cool stuff directly inside Miro. Take a look at that. I have the concept here. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time looking at this for the demonstration, but I got the idea. At least I think this is more something I want to go with here, this kind of shape. So I'll jump into Cinema 4D in the next presentation and get the general concept for my robot rolling, and maybe I'll jump back and forth and kind of sketch out some ideas as I go. And it might be that you don't work this way. Maybe you're really uncomfortable with taking pen to paper or mouse to web interface or mouse to document in Photoshop. And that's okay. I mean, you could really, if you're really comfortable in a 3D environment, or more comfortable than you would be with the pen in your hand or the mouse in your hand in a 2D environment, then you could actually basically do some really quick concept sketching inside a 3D environment by roughing out some shapes and seeing how they look relative to each other. So we'll do that as well coming up. So we'll catch up in the next presentation, and we'll start assembling the basic shapes for our robot.